welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. Well, we're starting to cruise through Genesis a little bit. We've already got up to the time of Abraham.
That's right.
And we're in an interesting story about Abraham this week in the Parsha, where Abraham's nephew, his nephew Lot, gets himself in a little bit of trouble, gets captured by some of the kings there. And in the meantime, so the two sets of kings start warring each other. There's 4 kings against 5 kings, and Lot, I think, is captured by the 5 kings. Is that correct?
No, actually by the 4.
By the 4 kings.
He's part of the 5, and he's with the 5, and he gets captured by the 4.
So he's taken. So Abraham says, I got to come to the rescue of my relative.
Right.
And he joins the other kings and declares war against the 4. Is that correct?
Yep.
And goes to war against them. And actually does pretty well in the war there.
Really does well. Cleans up.
Yeah. He cleans up. So here we are right at the beginning of the Torah, and we're starting to talk about war.
Right.
Now, I know you've mentioned before that the Torah pretty much covers every subject.
Mm-hmm.
When you eat, when you sleep, when you have sex, when you kill. There's a time for everything.
Right.
Even a time for war, I guess.
Time for war and time for peace.
Right.
Hey,
sounds like that'd be a good song.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can write that
be
down.
onto something here,
At a time. Yeah, that's actually not bad.
Okay.
Actually, that might work.
I could do a few others. Time to plant, time to
sow,
harvest.
and whatever. There's a lot of good things
Yeah,
there.
wow, okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
So here we are in war, and there's got to be a reason, I would assume, that the Torah is talking about it. Why do we go to war? This one's pretty easy. Abraham went to save his relative, but why do kings, why do countries throughout the centuries, and it's one thing that mankind has got pretty good at. Mm-hmm. It's probably the oldest thing that we do continuously is fight wars. Mm-hmm. Does the Torah tell us why? Why do we fight wars? Is it a good thing, bad thing?
Matter of fact, the Torah does tell, it's not even good thing, bad thing, although it is a bad thing. But it's something that we do.
And we do it well.
We keep doing it perpetually and perpetually.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, it really is almost the underlying cause of nations. I mean, look what's going on here. I mean, right now, I guess the next big one up is China. Everyone, it's very interesting, every nation, but many, many nations have had their world dominance moment.
All the ones in Europe really have.
Right.
We know that.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and we don't find that world dominance ever makes a comeback.
No, it doesn't.
You get one shot. You get your world dominance shot.
Really do, yeah.
You get your empire moment.
That's a good point.
Everyone has their empire moment, but after their empire is toppled, they never make a comeback.
The Swiss never really had their empire moment.
Yeah.
Maybe they're due.
Right.
They're due,
Right.
but it hasn't happened
Well,
yet.
we haven't seen, even Sweden. Sweden.
They did pretty well.
They had a period of time in the Swedes where they had a real empire.
Yeah.
But, no one ever makes a comeback, which is so fascinating.
That's true.
Babylonians didn't. The Greeks didn't. Big Greek Empire never made a comeback. Romans never made a comeback. Germany in more recent times.
Kind of. They had their hordes back. The Huns did a little bit of conquering, and then
maybe they
never made a long.
They mostly brought down the Roman Empire.
Yeah, they did.
They probably did more bringing down the Roman Empire than ever setting up their own empire.
Right.
And of course, they did have their short fling at world dominance, and that was gone. In modern times, you've had Germany, Japan. We don't know if they will never make a comeback, but I doubt that they're going to.
Probably not. No.
Spain.
Yeah, they were big.
Glory days.
Absolutely.
Not going to happen again.
Even Portugal had a big time.
England ruled the seas. Sun never set English down. Doubt it's ever going to happen again.
No.
Everyone had their big time. Poland was a great empire at one point.
Absolutely.
Gone. Right. So it's really interesting. The United States has had its empire era. We don't know exactly when that transfers, but I would have to say, I think most people would say it's on the downside of the empire era, especially because most people are not really so interested in maintaining that empire. There's a certain point...
Internally, we're not,
but there was a point where everyone wanted to have that empire. It was really important, go beat the Spanish, and then you get the Philippines and Guam out of the deal.
Which was a...
So there was this time when we really wanted that. We wanted to storm up San Juan Hill and take over Puerto Rico and all that type of stuff.
Yep.
And people wanted to expand their empires and everything. But then comes a point after where they're not really so interested in expanding sort of like once it's like been there, done that. Once I have it,
Right.
then I don't really want to pay the price to hang on to it. And it is always a big price to hang on to it.
Not a doubt.
And people start to think, well, that price tag is way too steep, so they're not really interested in hanging on to it. They start giving it up, and then someone else comes along. It would seem to me the next guy around that's coming up is China, and China's, of course, getting very militaristic, and they're expanding their military and all that.
Yep.
And I would expect that they'll be the next people up, and they're going to have to proclaim a war. They're going to have to. Now you say, well, why can't they just take over the world by buying up everything? You're going to see they're going to need to proclaim a war, because only when you proclaim a war, it's kind of like college football.
Right.
Only when you go head to head and you beat the other guy can we really say you're number one.
Now, there's a difference in college football. See, Alabama did reclaim its dominance from the 60s and 70s, and now it's back. But
Right.
I just want to throw that in there. But go ahead. I don't want to interrupt your
Perpetual
the point
power.
that you're making.
Perpetual powerhouse, Alabama.
Right.
But in college football, we could debate and we could debate and we could
Right.
debate who's number one. Some like West Coast team or some East Coast team, but they didn't play the same teams, and they didn't
Right.
play each other.
Right.
So no one knows. That's why they go, well, we got to have some type of playoff and all this type of stuff. Because until they go to war with each other and someone vanquishes the other guy,
Right.
and he's all done and he holds up, his victory fist, you never really know for sure. And that's why it is unfulfilling to anyone who thinks that they're number one to be number one without having beaten the other guy, because you can't really say for sure. Who is number
interesting.
one right now, China or the United States?
Well, you don't know. You're right. It's a good point.
If you go to China, I'm sure they'll tell you we're number one. Man, we own half the world. We got we bought up everyone's resources. We're the most populous. We're the most powerful now. But they're itching for a fight, and the reason they're itching for a fight is because they need to say we're number one in an incontrovertible way.
It's interesting because you bring that up, because even Hitler, when he was having his great successes at the beginning, mostly diplomatically, because the West kept surrendering, he was actually very upset in that he was not able to wage a real war against Czechoslovakia.
Right.
He was actually very upset because he wanted to show the world that he was dominant.
It
So that's
was
a good point.
really important to show everyone, and the only way you can do it is literally by stepping on their face.
That's a good point.
If they would surrender or negotiate some treaty, what would you like? We'll give it to you. No, I don't want it.
And
I
that's
want
how
to
he
beat
was.
you.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
I want to beat you. I don't want a letter from the other team saying that we recognize that you're dominant.
That's it.
No, I want to show up and beat you. I need to beat you, because that's the only way that I can prove to myself and to everyone else that I'm number one.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Now, here we have this strange story in the Torah. The story is strange because it's strange in and of itself, and I'll read it to you in just a second. And the story is strange just in and of the fact that it's in the Torah.
Right.
Because when it's all said and done, look what happened. Here's the story. In a rush, we'll just give you a quick read through of the story. So we're in Genesis, and this is chapter 14. And in Genesis chapter 14, it says as follows. And it's really interesting also. And it was in the days of Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Elasar, Kedar Laomer, the king of Elon, and Tidal, the king of Goyim. So those are 4 kings. They made war with Bera, the king of Sodom, Birsha, the king of Gomorrah, Shinab, the king of Madba, and Shemeber, the king of Mitzrayim, and Bela is the same as Soar, the king of Bela. So it's 5. 4 went up against the 5. Okay? They came up to a big battle where the Dead Sea is, and the 4 defeated the 5.
Right.
For 12 years, the 4 dominated the 5, but the 13th year, the 5 rebelled. So in the 14th year, the 4 came back, and it lists their names again, and it says, and they defeated the 5 who rebelled. Now, when they went out to war against them, the problem was the 5, Lot, Abraham's nephew, was part of the 5. So when he went out to war, and the 4, after the rebellion, when the 4 came to put down the 5's rebellion, and the 4 conquered the 5, so they took as many captives as they want, and amongst them was Lot, Avram's nephew. Now along comes Avram, and he heard that his nephew was taken captive, so he gathered up his men, 318, and he went out after the 4 kings. Abraham, so there's a total of 319 men, right?
Well, that's the thing I always wonder too. Is
and the Torah's got to give you the number there, by the way.
The wars fought with 20 people at a time, and he was big because he was 318, or was he small?
And they're giving you, I mean, yeah, maybe the world's population was smaller in those days.
That's really small.
Right. I am thinking that 4 kings were probably able to muster a whole lot more guys. Now, these 4 kings had just defeated the 5 kings.
Right.
Which means that they got their army and they captured all their people and all that. And in those days, when you conquered an army, the guys were now in your army.
All right.
So these guys are huge, and he's going to fight them. And what happened? He split his camp in 2, and they attacked at night, and he wiped them out, and he chased them all the way back to Damascus.
Yep.
He brought back all the goods and brought back Lot and all the men and all the women that were captured. And the king of Sodom came out to meet him upon his return, and all the kings that were with him, all the other kings. And they brought out bread and wine, and they blessed him, and they said, "Blessed is Abraham, the God of Most High, the God of heaven and earth, and blessed is the God of Most High, who delivered all your enemies into your hands." And then he said, what would you like? We'll give you everything, Abraham. And Abraham said, no, just give me back enough stuff to pay off my guys. They need to get some compensation.
And for 319, that can't be that much,
And of course, now he's got Lot back, and pay the guys who fought with me. So you can pay off 318 guys. I mean, that should be pretty simple.
Tough.
And he said, the rest of it, you guys take. What a bizarre story. And then the Torah moves on.
Right.
And we're back to Abraham and his children. And what a bizarro story.
It really is.
Here is a rule. There was a great rabbi, Rabbi Elijah of Vilna. He died around the year 1800. And Rabbi Elijah of Vilna said, there's a rule. Whenever, the Torah talks about a lot of different things. Whenever the first time anything appears in the Torah, that is where the essence is.
Okay.
That's where the essence is. Now, when we look at this story, this is the first time war appears in the Torah. This is the seminal war story. All the battles that are ever going to be fought. We never heard of anyone, except maybe Cain and Abel, but we never heard of countries fighting with each other and going to war until this story. And then after that, there's a whole bunch of stories and references to wars.
War's real big after
Right. There's plenty of wars in the Torah, okay? Yep. And references to other countries that fought wars and all kinds of stuff. But this is the first time we see war. And here in the story, it's particularly 4 kings against 5 kings. Did we really need to know that it was 4 kings against 5 kings?
It's pretty interesting detail.
And did we really need to know the names of the 4 kings and the names of the 5 kings? And by the way, if you read it, they are repeated twice. The names of the 4 kings who defeated the 5 kings. Like the second time, I already heard those names before. I get it. Just call them the 4 and the 5. Right? Okay. So, and one last question before we start to do some answers. What's Abraham? I understand you want to free your nephew. Why don't you do one of these Saving Private Ryan deals?
Oh, I
can
do that, right.
He takes on the 4 kings who just rule the world.
He could have done a little.
I mean, Saving Private Ryan. You get your group together. You try to track him down. You try to save him. You try to sneak off with him. Yeah. How did he go to war against the 4 kings and he defeats them?
He beat them. Yeah.
And when it ends up really, who really rules the world when it's all done?
Well, he gives it back to the other guys, though, doesn't he? No.
He does, but what do they all come out and they say?
Well, say God took care of
Blessed to God, your God, the God of it. Now remember, beforehand, Abraham was a guy. He was promoting God. He was a God, represent God.
So you think this is when he finally spread it? Okay.
The idea, it went international. It went.
Okay.
The kings, it said the king of Sodom and all the other kings came out to him. They brought him gifts, and they said, "Blessed be Abraham of God Most High, and blessed be God Most High, who delivered you from your enemies."
Wow. First religious war, too? This is big.
And why did Abraham do it? He only did it, sounds like, to get Lot back.
That's what they said.
And in the end, he ends up making God the most popular in the world because they recognized that God defeated the four kings. And the four kings were ruling the whole world. So now everyone recognizes really unusual story.
Yeah. So
there's Midrash, these rabbinical insights that explain this story. But the really interesting thing here is that Abraham, the nations go to war against each other. Why did the four pick on the five? I understand why the five rebelled, because no one likes to be dominated by them. But why did the four go to war in the first place?
Doesn't say, does it?
Doesn't say.
No.
Now you would think, I'm sure, if you get go in the library, they'll do some research, and this one will say it was because of slavery, and this will say no, it's because of they had all the factories, or they wanted the natural resources, or age-old antipathy between this group and that. They'll come up with I'm sure many people wrote lots of doctoral theses on what. Okay. The rabbis say, why they went to war? The four defeated the five, attacked and defeated the five, because they were going to get Lot, the nephew.
That was the whole purpose, you're saying. Wow.
You know why they wanted
This is only
Lot?
the second time this happened. In the first battle, they didn't get Lot, right?
They conquered all the nations.
Okay,
yeah, that's true.
That's right.
But then but they left him.
Okay.
Like we conquer you. There's conquering and occupation.
Right. Okay.
This is like the first Gulf War.
Gotcha.
They beat them, but they didn't want to occupy. Because occupation is so messy.
That's tough.
And really, that's what everyone says. The first Bush said, I don't want to get involved with that.
That's true too. Yeah.
And there's an argument for that. But then the second time around, second Bush said, no. We're going in and finishing the job, because when you don't really occupy, you don't finish the job. And sure enough, same thing here.
Okay.
They rebelled.
And the same thing happened. Okay.
They rebelled, which, if you'd occupied, they wouldn't rebel. But when you don't occupy...
So they wanted Lot, though. They
were after Lot. Now, why do you want Lot? What do you get from getting Lot? The Medrash says they thought they'll get Lot. Abraham will have to come after him. When Abraham comes after him, we get Abraham. What's the big deal in getting Abraham?
You prove you're either bigger than God or God isn't there.
Abraham's saying, you guys, you're nothing. There's a God. He's bigger than you. Here they go out, they defeat the five kings. We run the world. No. Yeah, you got the world, big deal. God's got God. God's even bigger than that.
There's one guy.
What do you need?
Too, yeah.
Right? Now, if you can get rid of Abraham, then you silence that message.
And that's gone.
We are really
that
number
would be
one.
the end of the Torah right then.
Right. We are really, really number one. This is like when they go in on the whole the bowl committee and the playoff committee.
Right.
Yeah, but they never really defeated.
Right.
Okay, we're going to get Abraham. We're going to defeat him. Now, Abraham, from his perspective, what's he going after Lot for? This is suicide.
You would think so.
This is absolute suicide. How does he expect with 318 guys? He rounds up all his guys. He has 318 of them.
Shepherds, pretty much. Not much. They're not big warriors.
Like, we're going to give out 5 stones for each guy.
Right.
Guys are carrying their slingshots and what does he think he's really going to do? So again, it's true. Abraham, if he was going to fight a war, Abraham would have said, I'm going to have to let Lot go because I'm not obligated to commit suicide to try to save him.
Right.
Again, if you want to save Private Ryan, who says that anyone should die to save Private Ryan?
Right.
There's Private Ryan, but there's Private Jones. Why should Jones die for Ryan?
True.
So Abraham could say, why should I die for Lot? I understand. I wish I could save him, but to the point of giving my life. Abraham said, You know what? These guys are against God. You know why?
That's interesting.
And here's the kicker. They're against God because there's 4 of them. There's 4. What's the deal with 4? And 4 specifically fought against 5. You can tell me that's just the way it was? I'll tell you why the Torah bothered to mention it.
So many times.
Why didn't it just say, there was a war, and Lot got captured,
right,
and Abraham went after him, and he defeated the guy, and all. Why did it specifically tell you the 4, and their 4 names, and they went up against 5? What if they went up against 6 or 3 or 2? Where do we care?
That's true.
Okay, so in Hebrew, every letter has a number.
Right.
Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet. Its numerical value is 1. Base is the second letter of the alphabet, numerical value 2. Gimel, third, numerical value 3. Daled, 4, numerical value 4. And Hey, numerical value 5. Now, if you look at the letter Daled, the letter Daled is sort of like an upside down L.
Right.
Looks like an L, right?
Something like that.
Right. So turn it upside down. Now, the letter Hey, which is the next letter of the alphabet, is that same Dalet, but it's got a little mark off in the lower left quadrant.
Right.
Right? That makes the letter Hey. Okay. Now, Dalet is the concept of digressing from God.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Let's picture a plane. Picture a plane. In the middle of the plane, you put a dot. Okay? Now, how many ways can you digress from that dot?
A plane? What kind of plane are you talking about?
Plane,
That's
and there's
an
a dot.
airplane. I got confused. Okay,
No,
a
a plane.
Yeah,
like geometric plane.
Okay, right. You
Or
put
we
a
can
dot.
let's
Right.
turn it up so all you people at home can see it.
Right.
Okay? They got a plane.
Right.
There's a dot. How many ways can I digress from that? Mostly people would probably say like 360.
That's what I'm
right?
thinking, yeah.
Right. Now, that's, of course, if you use degrees or something. There's actually probably an infinite number of ways because you can do half degrees and fraction of degrees. But primarily, there are 4 ways you can
I didn't know
digress.
there was going to be math here. I wasn't
Sorry.
prepared. Okay, go ahead.
There are primarily 4 ways you can digress from the point.
Right.
Right? Like in the 4 points of the compass. There's all kinds. There's northeast and southwest, but there's basically north, south, east, and west.
Okay.
Right? Or 0, 90, 180, so on and so forth. Okay? There are 4 primary digressions that are absolute opposites. The 2 are opposites of each other.
Right.
Okay? You can digress in 4 primary ways. 4 is the number that represents getting away from the dot. The dot is 1. Dot is indivisible. In geometry, the dot is indivisible. It is one wholeness. Okay? Abraham represents oneness.
Right.
4 represents getting away from oneness. The 4 nations of the world, they say, we don't believe in this oneness because oneness means one under God. Right? Indivisible, with truth and justice for all. Right? We are one under God. Well, 1, God is really 1. And 4 digresses from that. These 4 kings were trying to get away from the concept that there is one God. And Abraham said, that just outrages me. I don't care. I'm just so upset, I'm going to go get him. It's really like a David and Goliath thing.
So it really wasn't about Lot for him. I'm going.
I'm going to get him.
Okay.
I'm going to get him. Period. I'm going after these guys. Can't hold me back. I'm just so outraged. Yeah. And he went out there, and you know what happened? He actually beat him.
Yeah.
He actually beat him. And he brought the world, he beat them, and then he gave everything back to the 5. Really interesting. 5. That's 4 with a little dot in the lower left-hand corner.
Right.
That dot, there's the dot again. He put the dot back into the 4. Those 4 were digressing, and he said, you're trying to get away from the dot. Guess what? Here comes the dot back again. 1. Oneness comes back. Abraham puts oneness back into it. Okay? Wow. And really, we always talk about, many times we spell God's name with a yud, the letter yud, which is really just a dot, and the letter hey. Because the idea of hey represents God's name oftentimes. It says in the Torah early on, Behi bor and there's this famous rabbinical teaching, with the letter hey, God created the world. The letter hey represents God at the center of the 4 directions. And Abraham puts God back in the picture.
Wow.
The truth is, all war, the purpose of war is to promote yourself as being the best. And the only way you can ultimately do it, no matter how much you conquer, no matter how much you politically take over, and no matter how much you economically dominate, ultimately, everyone needs to have that head-to-head showdown and step on someone else's face to show that I'm number one. And sometimes it's up against God. And when you take on God and you want to prove God, then you got to watch out, because the Medrash says, watch out. When people start going to war like that, then the Messiah is not too far to follow. Ooh. What was the result of taking on God in Abraham's story?
Well, pretty soon, it didn't work out too well for him.
Did God? And how did God? And how did God do? God came out of this looking really well. God came out looking better than he had ever looked before, and that's the bottom line, because that's what Abraham's job is in the world. Abraham's job is to make God look good, and that's exactly what he did. So that's the way it turned out. They started a war. They thought they're going to obliterate this oneness concept, get rid of Abraham, and in the end, it turned out just the opposite. They got themselves obliterated, and the oneness concept became more powerful than ever. This is the first story of war in the Torah, and it is therefore the seminal story of war, and tells us what war is really all about.
Pretty much what it's about altogether.
Right, and world war, which this is world war, world dominance, and world war, that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, that makes sense. That really does.
Right.
So, yeah.
And by the way, and I don't want to get into it, we'll talk about this some other time, but we believe that there were 4 nations ultimately that dominated the world and tried to take it away from godliness, and that would be Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome.
Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome.
Right, those 4.
No, that makes sense.
And we believe those are the 4 ultimate enemies of Israel, and it's Israel's job is to survive or overcome each and every one of them.
Makes sense.
The 4, and the 4 get played out later on in history.
Wow. So that's how the playoff came, 4 teams. I'm just trying to think.
A 4-team playoff, there you go.
That makes sense. Okay, so Nick Saban should do well in football, but leave God out of it, Nick. You can't go that far.
That's right. Don't take on God.
Don't
take on God. You might get in big trouble.
Well, roll tide.
And you could see a 5-team playoff.
No, that wouldn't even make any sense.
That would not work very well.
Wouldn't work. Makes sense. No. Wow, this was interesting. Again, I didn't know there was math coming into this. I would have prepared, but still, this is great.
Okay, you can do the seek Khan Academy geometry.
Right, should have done that. My bad. Very interesting. This was a good one. Okay, and it does give us a description of what war is about. Actually, throughout the ages, because it comes down to the same thing.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Awesome. Good topic. Good topic. I learned something good today.
Me too.
All right. Well, that's good. So, all right, next week we'll be back.
Next week
with a very exciting. Probably no math next week, so don't worry. But it'll be a good, exciting topic.
Right,
Rabbi.